God. Hi everyone, Anthony Shaved Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Undeath record. It's time to rise from the grave. This is the second full-length album of New York death metal outfit Undeath. First reviewed the band's music back in the thick of the pandemic 2020 with the release of their debut Lesions of a Different Kind. And at the time, I guess I didn't know how much I felt like I personally needed their bloody and blunt force brand of old school death metal. While Undeath weren't exactly reinventing the wheel here, the performances and the riff writing were good, actually quite good. Good enough to make their tried and true death metal methodology sound fun to plug into again, but there was also kind of a wild attitude about it as well that just made the whole thing feel refreshing, like I was hearing this sound anew for a little bit. Now, from the teasers of this new record, I was kind of getting the sense that we were in for another helping of that, but didn't think the band would be focusing their energy so much effectively on this project that some of the tracks here would be coming out a little catchy. Now, just like its predecessor, Its Time is a full-on death metal assault spread across 10 tracks and 35 minutes. And with the opening track, pretty much what you see is what you get. Heavy, down-tuned guitars, twisted tremolo passages, guttural growls, Cro-Magnon thrash riffs. The mix is a little thicker and a little more oppressive this time around, which for this genre is fine. There is something to the clarity and the crispness of the last record that maybe part of me does prefer a little bit, but again, this is a fine trade-off. Also, lyrics about digging up and eating and sexing up corpses. Why not? And there's just really no room to breathe on this track, especially on the song structure end. Every section of the track hits as relentlessly as the next. Though I will say with that, the transition from section to section in the song is lacking nuance and becomes like a little unceremonious by the time we get to the finish. And you know what? Maybe that's a case of me looking for something in the wrong place here, as this is a very old school and very aggressive death metal record. But still, there is something that stands out to me a little more about the track Defiled Again, with its tension-building intro eventually letting loose into these thunderous double bass drums and heavy headbanging riffs. A pretty sick solo passage as well. Now, the track Rise from the Grave I might even dare to call hooky. It's time to rise from the grave. The Anthemic solo section toward the end does make for a nice melodic contrast from the rest of the song too. Now, NECROBIONICS has a stupidly simple drum groove that is still incredibly captivating and matches the gruesome energy of the riffs and vocals that sit on top of it. Dun-ga, dun-gun-ga, dun-ga. And it's one of a couple tracks on this thing that digs a little deeper into this narrative about taking corpse pieces and combining those with robot pieces, like turn them into robots and then giving them weapons, which sounds like something disgustingly epic I would have made a comic strip about when I was in 5th grade, and I mean that in the best way possible. Enhancing the Dead also goes on about this mecha corpse army, but describing it essentially taking over the world and replacing all life on Earth. This story being complemented with some cool groove switches here and there, some enhanced bass work, but outside of that, I would say it's a pretty meat and potatoes old school death metal affair. But the Funeral Within actually manages to be another snappy moment on the project. It's time to begin. The funeral within. Fractured mortal sin. The bones have left your skin. Damn, that's a hook. I mean, it's demented, but it is a hook. Yeah, I would cite this as effective songwriting, but in a death metal context. And the contrast transitioning from those really tense verses to this super gratifying chorus, more gratifying than you would anticipate for something in this lane, is just great. I've even felt some of those sinister tremolo leads in the mix getting caught in my head. Now, I don't know what it is about the sound of heads splattered 7 ways, but for whatever reason, this track is heavier and more oppressive and more crushing than any other song here. There are points where it's actually pretty exhilarating how dissonant and chaotic the whole thing is, especially around the solo passage. Then some of the guitar work on Human Chandelier brings an almost melodic death metal flair to it, especially with some of these leads having a bit of a classical undertone to it, which frankly I think is a good fit for Undeath, especially if they can manage to continue sounding so gruesome while doing it. Now, on the song Bone Rot, it's really all about speed, the intense drumming, those coked out speed metal solos, a splash of reverb in the mix too to make things sound just a little cavernous, plus those metallic clanging effects popping into the track on the back end, which I'm sure has something to do with the song's lyrics about turning like like, you know, sinew and bone into steel. Now, ultimately, this LP ends as brutally as it starts, which I guess in one breath is fine, but simultaneously speaks to, I think, an unwillingness on the band's part to vary from the old school death metal blueprint that inspires them so. And don't get me wrong, sticking to their guns does lead to a lot of very heavy, visceral, thrilling moments. This is just a sound and a style that Undeath very obviously plays into well. But by that same token, there were quite a few moments on this LP, like the opening track, for example, that ran a little average due to their lack of adventure, I'd say. I also noticed, at least for me, the intensity of some of these tracks did tend to wear off with increased plays. Now, don't get me wrong, there are memorable moments on this record and songs that are worth returning to, but when I found tracks that kind of fit that description for me, it was due to the fact that the band was getting a little more ambitious with either the amount of aggression they displayed on a song, melodic color, the narrative in a given track, or even just how catchy some of their choruses are. And while I think this record is good, I'm hoping the band can drop an even better LP down the road as they kind of push forward with some of those elements and maybe even combine them a bit more into the future. But really, that's just my personal preference at this point. If you're looking for a very solid, old school, nasty ass fucking death metal record, Undeath has got you fucking covered. There's no doubt about that. And yeah, I'm feeling a decent 2 strong 7 on this one. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Undeath, forever.